Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Cookie Jar Golf Podcast. Sam here, just wanted to put a real quick cover note on this pod. We sat down with Lee Wybranski up in St Andrews during the 150th Open. For those of you who don't know, Lee is a golf artist and designer really, so creates golf logos, branding, all sorts of assets for a number of different clubs in America and further afield. But, you know, he's possibly most famous known for his watercolours and his major championship commissions, which are truly spectacular. Lee's brilliantly articulate. I mean, he's a superb talker, super passionate about the game of golf. Really interesting hearing how he tackles these different pieces of work, whether it's a watercolour or a new logo. It's fascinating. So yeah, look, you're going to love it. It's a cracking episode. If you want to hear more from Lee or find out more, then head over to leewybranski.com. And without further ado, it's over to the pod.
Watch this. No way!
Let's start from the beginning. Were you always a painter?
Yeah, I was that kid who was always drawing in the corner from the time I can remember. Started out drawing Spider-Man and Batman when I was 4 or 5, and then, by the time you get to high school, you're drawing rock bands or athletes, and then further on, went to art school at university and carried on from there. Wasn't always a landscape painter at all, frankly. Had no real interest in the landscape as a subject when I was younger and in university. But golf kind of led me to the landscape, and now it's something I've come to fall in love with.
So you're a player first, and then a painter of the sport after, if that makes sense.
Actually, the opposite. I started playing in my mid-20s after receiving my first few commissions in golf. I was receiving a lot of invitations to play some of these great places. My first commission was Winged Foot, which hosted the U.S. Open a few years ago for, I think, the sixth time.
How did that come about?
What's that?
How did that come about?
Well, right out of university, I sort of stumbled into this opportunity where I was doing architectural renderings, pen and ink drawings of buildings, private estates, small institutions outside of Philadelphia, where I'm from, and did that for a year or two and tried to figure out how to sort of grow that business into something more interesting. So we began to show my portfolio to some of the best clubs around New York City, and Winged Foot was the first commission that I received, and that first year or two in golf, all I did were clubhouses. I did black and white, very traditional, almost like etching looking drawings of some of the most famous clubhouses in the Northeast, and that was really how I got my foot in the door of golf. And at the club level, and it's a bit of a, I don't know, I feel like this is changing a little bit. The culture of golf is changing a bit, but it's very status driven, and once Winged Foot signed us on, it certainly opened a few doors right away. Well, so after Winged Foot hired me, within that first year I had done 4 or 5 other top 100 clubs in the U.S., and then all of a sudden I was a golf artist, and at that point in time, people started saying, well, we really love your look, we love your work. Can you do this? And, as a small business person, you say, sure, I can do that. And then you go learn how to do it, and you figure it out, and you go. Probably like you gentlemen.
Yeah, I suppose it's like always iteration.
I find, it's going to sound like a ridiculous question, but I'm going to ask anyway. I look back at some of the early films that we did, and I watch back, and I never regret anything that we did or created, and even go further back in my previous career. I look back at things and go, ooh, wouldn't do it like that now. But I don't regret any of those things, because every single one of those things led me to where I am now. Do you look back at some of the early work and think, yeah, I probably wouldn't have painted it like that now, or approached it differently? Or do you think you've stayed pretty consistent over the career?
I think that I still think, frankly, that you're always seeking to improve, so there are things I could look back on and say that, I would have handled that a little bit differently today, but 5 years hence, hopefully I'll be looking at what I do now and think the same thing. You want to keep expanding your repertoire, so to speak. So there's nothing that I've done that really I would say I regret or would do dramatically differently. And also, I've been very aware from the get-go that you're only as good as your last job, so to speak.
Yeah.
You can't put out anything that you're not willing to stand up next to, and I never have. And when I first started painting, I was quite known for the watercolor work that I've been doing for the last 20-some years, and I didn't really learn any of that in college or university. I kind of taught myself how to paint in watercolor because I've always been more of a draftsman than a painter. I'm more of a compositional artist than a colorist. So,
sorry, that's quite technical, and I'm not an artist. So, what do you mean when you say that?
Some painters are just extremely painterly. They have a natural affinity for the feeling of the paint. They're very comfortable with mashing the paint together and sort of how juicy and viscous and the I don't know what you'd call it, the texture and the consistency of it, as well as the color of it. And I've been much more, maybe because of what I kind of grew up drawing, but I was much more concerned with composition, creating compositions that appeal to the eye and that lead the eye through it. I don't want to compare myself to any of the greats, but there's a famous quote, which I'll butcher, about, Picasso and Matisse. Matisse is considered one of the great colorists, and Picasso had one of the great lines. It was all about the line. And I feel like, I'm much more about the line than I am about the color or the hue and the shading. So I began to work in watercolor because I was much more comfortable on paper than I ever was on canvas at the beginning. So I started work in watercolor because you work on paper with watercolor. So it felt like sort of more of a gradual step for me and not a leap off of a cliff like jumping right into oil would have been. And then having worked in watercolor exclusively for quite a long time, I began to get back into oil and acrylic and some more forgiving media, which is a nice relief because watercolor, as you may know, is a relatively unforgiving media or medium. Given that it's transparent, you really can't cover mistakes. So, and given that I'm a commercial artist who deals with deadlines, I'm not really in the I'm not really in the position to start something, do some experimenting, and then find out 3 days later that it's not working out and start over again. So
fascinating. Yeah, that's really interesting. Just hearing you talk about different mediums and what you lean on there as an artist, it's a insight that we've not really had on this pod before. I mean, I would be, I suppose, most familiar with your major championship commissions that you do and are absolutely famous for, and quite rightly, because they're brilliant. And you talk about composition; they're always quite striking because I always feel like every major championship commission you do, it's almost trying to take that unique feeling. I've got the Lytham one. My wife's from Lytham, so I've got your Lytham one in my office. How do you approach each of those?
Well, the posters, I love the posters because, as you fellas may know, we do a lot of logo design, which is very much about real estate, right? It's you have to get as much as you can into as small an area as possible. So it's very much about efficient messaging. And then on the landscape painting side, it's almost like comparing maybe a poem to a novel, like with a landscape, a traditional landscape painting, you have all the time and space in the world to include as much detail as you wish. And to me, the posters occupy this wonderful middle ground where it's more like a short story, I think, where you really strip it down to what the essential elements are, and you focus all of the viewer's attention on the essentials, and then you just omit all the other extraneous bits that really aren't necessary. And sometimes you might even say, in my opinion, clutter up a picture. I've never been one to rely exclusively on detail for the power of my pictures. I try and include just enough detail to keep it interesting for the viewer to find little bits as their eyes wander through the picture. But I had no wish ever to be any sort of photorealist where you're just amazed that every every blade of grass is painted in there. So. With the poster work, I use a lot of bad metaphors, but I generally say there can be 3 characters in the poster, and usually more than that, and it loses its punch, so to speak. So when I visit,
3 sort of almost points of interest within there, whether it's the clubhouse or the flag mast or you've got obviously the spectators on the 18th fairway this year. That's what you mean by those almost
Exactly
no more than
right.
3 bits of context, I guess.
When I go to a client for the first time, or a venue for the first time, especially if it's not one I'm familiar with, because it's a different challenge when you go to a place like the Old Course or in the States, maybe Oakmont, places where the viewers know they know the place. They have these iconic views that everyone in golf knows, the view down the 18th, here at the Old Course. So, but when you go to a venue that you're not familiar with, what I try to do first is identify what the most iconic features of the property are, and then I try to find a composition that includes each of those important elements in a view that is harmonious and appealing.
Well, we should probably, it would be great, I mean, this is an audio means, but it'd be really interesting for us, I think, to maybe get the 150th Open. We're looking at the St Andrews poster and the work you've done obviously around this Open, and it'd just be really interesting to kind of see it and kind of get you to sort of walk us through it, I guess, really.
I mean, I think when you arrived, you said, "Shall I get this out?" And Sam's like, "No, it's fine. We know what it looks like." But now it's interesting because as you talk through methodology, you've kind of like, as a complete novice, or not even a novice, because I've never painted in my life. You think, oh, they just stand somewhere and paint it. You don't think about what's the thought process that's gone into and what is trying to be achieved. So, right, we've got it here in front of us. I'm sure we can get something online.
So the wrong way around for you, I suppose. You know it so well, don't you?
But here we've got kind of an aerial image of. First of all, how do you get a drone image and start from that, or because it's hard for you to imagine where that's come from?
Right. So this was a wonderful challenge. This project this year, because. As we said, there are iconic views, and none more iconic here at St Andrews than the 1st and the 18th, with the R&A Clubhouse and the Hamilton and Links Road and all. So the question or the challenge that I face when these types of projects is how to repackage or represent the familiar in a new and interesting way that hasn't been seen before. So that was sort of the first criteria that I laid out for myself. And given that this is the 150th Open and the home of golf, I really wanted to showcase the town and the links together, not just the golf course, but really, one of the things as a foreigner here, one of the things that really strikes, I think, most Americans when they come to St. Andrews, especially for the first time, is just how integrated the golf and the town are to one another. I mean, it's not new to you fellas. Everyone knows all the stories of the courses closing on Sundays and people walking their dogs, and how it's part of the town and common land, etc. But I really wanted the artwork to somehow showcase that unique integration that exists here and frankly, probably no place else. I also wanted to, with the crowds here, I wanted to show some of the things that you find at the Open Championship that you just don't see anywhere else as well. And I thought that, the way that the spectators are allowed to encircle the final green on Open Sunday is just one of those.
Yeah, it's one of those great things, right? It's one of the brilliant things about this event.
Well, it was the PGA when... Is at Kira, which was, I think it happened there, and it's absolutely not tradition to happen there, but it's one of those things that I think you get at the Open, which is there's just so much excitement. You can't control that many thousands of people, and they just had to roll with it there. But it's a great tradition. They do this here. Sam and I wax lyrical about it, but we went to the amateur at Lytham this year and watched that, and it's a very different experience because you walk the fairways and like you used to, and it is a great tradition we have here. So you try to...
Some great little bits of detail with people in the water, and you sort of... You pick them out, don't you, over time? They're kind of... Yeah.
There's a bit more detail in this. I mean, this scene requires, in my view... you have to serve the picture. I don't like to have a ton of detail unless it's necessary. In a picture like this, I feel like it is necessary. The architecture, you can't do a half-assed job rendering the buildings here. You need to make sure all your perspectives are correct and all your corners are square, etc. Otherwise, it ends up looking a little bit amateurish to me.
Well, my only criticism, Lee, is that if you'd taken the image from a little bit left, you would have got the building that we're sat right now. We're just tucked behind the Hamilton there. So, unfortunately, we haven't made it. But The detail in the architecture is. Did it take you long to paint?
This is one of the longest I've ever taken, and it really almost drove me over the edge, this piece. It was really, really... I mean, I lived with this for 2.5 months, and I moved my studio in the midst of this painting, which added a little bit of personal stress to it. But, if you look closely, all these little outfits, I'm no fashion designer, and I'm not even much of a fancy dresser, frankly, but having to try and come up with all the different outfits there's a lot of little bits and odds and ends in there, and the stripes, the polka dots, the hats, the shorts, everything, there needs to be a lot of variety in there, because that's what makes the picture interesting. You can't just paint the same outfit on everybody, so it really required a lot of extra imagination and a lot more fine brushwork than I generally employ. So
because also colours have to go together so neatly, and your paintings are so colourful. I can imagine if you start getting the colour balance wrong in some of the garments people are wearing, the whole thing would quickly start to look a bit
it's even things like the shadows. Like, that must be so annoying, because they've all got to point in the right direction and all things like that.
I suppose you have to get the orientation of the sun right as well.
That's
just an obvious thing, right?
For sure, yeah. Things like that stand out. I mean, they only stand out if they're wrong. That's like a lot of things in visual art. Like, I feel if everything's right, you don't necessarily notice any of it. But if it's wrong, you notice it right away. So
and the
all those little things.
You always then commissions go to the champion as well. Is that right? Do they
the original pieces I retain until we sell them. I seek to sell them to the host venues first, and if they decline, I will often approach the winners.
Yeah.
Pulling for Rory in more ways than one this week, because he owns 2 of my paintings already for his victories at the U.S. Open at Congressional and then at the Open at Hoylake. So I'd love for him to be the proud owner of this come the end of the day today. So a number of the players
it's in the feels like the narratives, isn't it? Feels like Rory. Obviously, we're going to find out later today, but everything going on around the game, it's hard not to pull for Rory, I think, in many respects.
Like they've been saying on the television, I think 99% of the fans out here are pulling for Rory. He's due, and he's just such a great spokesman for the game. He's so articulate. I said over and over this week to a lot of folks from here, I think that, the Europeans always are more interesting interviews in the media. They just give less... automatic, more thoughtful, more insightful candid responses.
Yeah.
And Rory's maybe, I mean, some of the guys might be more funny. You think of Lee Westwood and his famous, drunken interviews or after the Ryder Cup and whatnot. And, I mean, he might be a little bit funnier, but I think Rory is just an incredibly insightful and intelligent guy, and he's so well-spoken, and I love, he's so, I don't know, mature. He owns up to things and recognizes his strengths and weaknesses. I'm a fan like most people here, and I'd love to see him carry it off today.
It's been a great celebration this week.
You've obviously been doing, I've seen on Instagram, you've been doing some painting around and about. What have you been doing around about the Open this week?
We did a little campaign this week because I love to get out on the golf course to paint during the events, to sort of document the championship. It's a real treat for me to do something. These studio paintings, they take hundreds of hours sometimes, and it's a very different animal. It's more crafted, whereas getting out there is more sort of gestural, more trying to get quick impressions down, and it's a real treat to be the artist for these championships. So I take the easel out as often as I can to get out there and just kind of stretch my legs creatively. It's too much studio work is kind of bad for your psyche, I feel like. When you're working from photographs exclusively, for me personally, it tends to make me very, very tight over time, very methodical in my work, and the sort of more impulsive and spontaneous aspects of the creative act become fewer and fewer. So getting the paint box out, going to the Jigger Inn, or painting the Seven Sisters, things like that, during the event.
It's always like revitalizing, isn't it? It sort of sparks more creative juices.
It really puts gas in the tank, It really charges me up, and that part of the creativity sort of gets depleted, I feel like, in the studio over time, and it gets you excited, and even interacting with, I have some fans and collectors now, having done this for a lot of years, and it's great to just be out there and talk with people and just hear how people enjoy, watching the work and enjoy viewing the work and all that kind of thing. So just that part of it is really exciting too. That sort of like interpersonal affirmation and encouragement.
But we get that as
welcome.
well with the jar. Like you can just feel so stale sometimes when you aren't necessarily traveling or getting new experiences constantly. And I think you summed it up beautifully there. Just puts gas in the tank. That's exactly how when we go on tour and stuff, it's like you just feel revitalized with ideas, things you want to go and chase down.
It's a bit of
energizing.
a normal distribution because you get revitalized and then you get exhausted.
Yeah.
And when you're
true.
cleaning
At the end of
Rosa
the
in the
week,
garden all afternoon, the exhaustion also comes in a little bit there.
Yeah, we probably overindulged a bit in the week as well, which always tends to take it out of you a little bit. But
can we talk about logos?
I'd like to talk about logos.
I mean, I'm obsessed with golf logos. Most people who listen to this podcast, there's something really weird about golf logos, like no other sport, where there's this obsession over logo bingo, where you wear logos, what each logo would mean to you in relation to pieces of apparel or whatever. How they're designed, there's some disgusting golf logos out there.
Yeah.
And there are some outrageously good ones. You've seen our logo, right? We have a little logo as well. Does he rate our logo? Let's start that way.
First of all, do you like the logo?
I do like it. If you're going to ask me to actually critique it, I want to have it in front of me because I don't want to misspeak.
I'm going to get it up, but it's actually.
I know you have a monogram worked in there, which is sort of a quirky, very old school looking monogram.
It's coming here, Sam.
Okay.
It's also got some plagiarism in there. I wonder if you can pick it out. It's an homage to a.
Have we got our logo? In fact, I'll get it on the podcast artwork.
It's got an homage to
it's all over
golf club in America, in it.
I mean, it's the C and the G are reminiscent of Oakmont's monogram, but there's a lot of CCCs out there in the States that have that little point on the ends of the C. I'm not seeing any direct plagiarism, so you have to...
I'd say that's good because we
wouldn't
want to be taken to task. But
it's
certainly it's got a little bit of an homage to Atlanta.
Atlanta Athletic.
Oh, okay.
Atlanta Athletic.
But you like the logo?
I do like it. I
Not
think,
bowled over?
Well, in my view...
You can be really honest.
In my view, I could tell you this. I don't want to be pejorative, but I will say that the trend, I've been doing logo design in golf since 99 was our first. Atlantic City Country Club was our first logo client in golf.
Wow.
It was over 100 years old at the time, and it had changed ownership, and we were brought in to create a new mark that would celebrate the history but be something more functional moving forward than what they had in place. So in general, I would say in the last 25 years, the logos that move the needle most in golf are image-based.
Yeah.
And monograms are always going to be part of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
These letter form logos, they're always going to have their place at the table. But I feel like, generally speaking, our clients want something that's more pictographic in nature. So
the iconic ones of Marion.
That's really the only. I mean, the thing
yeah.
about your mark, I think that is quite nice because it has a very old. It looks like it could be 100 years old or something like that. And I think that's really what you want. It's harder to be original with a letter form logo, and it's harder to sort of have personality.
Yeah.
And I think you accomplished both of that. So in that regard, and we've done monogram and letter form based logos for sure over the years, but I just feel like the trend is more like, one of the logos that we're best known for over here is the hare, the Waterville logo.
Yeah.
The hare, the Irish hare that we did for them. And I think that
so that's yours. I didn't know you did that one. Okay, yeah. Wow.
That was very proud. It's probably our only. We did our first Royal Golf Club logo over the last couple of years. We did a new logo for Royal Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea.
Wow.
They reached out to us through social media, and I didn't. It wasn't a project that required travel, but I was very excited. I mean, I feel like. Exactly as you described your audience is sort of, that's how I've been since I got into golf. Even though I got into the game late, I jumped in with both feet, as like a lot of artists do. I think if something captures your imagination and your attention, you know, you want to learn everything about it. And when I got into golf, I read all the old classics, you know, the 100-year-old books, and all the way up to the new things, you know, just looking for basically what was authentic, you know, because even more so in America, I feel like there's sort of lots of baggage that comes along with golf that's sort of less appealing, you know. There's certain, you know, whatever you want to say, political baggage, you know, things like that. So, you know, but at root, the game is, you know, that's what I would always say. The game, you can't compare to anything. It's just it's so pure, so maddening. So, you know, that great Palmer quote, you know, it's the most superlative of everything that a game can be. So I was always looking for what we used to call the authentic experience of golf, you know, the truest authentic representation of the best in the game. And so whether that was literature or books, you know, and when in the 90s, for example, you know, you had Kenneth Reed, you know, the great artist who's done a lot of work here for the R&A, whose work I'm a great admirer of. But then in the States, you also had these sort of, you know, gaudy, awful, inspirational posters with like some, you know, tepid motivational quote underneath a picture of an island green or something, you know, and it was just like the tackiest thing that you could imagine. So I was looking at these, you know, and everything in between. And as an artist trying to find my way in this space, I was always looking for cues from greats who had gone before, you know. So, you know, there was a lot of stuff out there that was just, I know I don't want to do anything like that. And then you'd find other things, you'd be like, wow, that's really good. I could lift a little bit of that and put that into my work, you know. So I was always looking for the authentic and the best elements of what had been done before, and try to make my sort of contribution to that legacy.
So when you go to a club, Lee, what is it that if you're commissioned to do a logo, what is it that you're trying to do in terms of how do you choose an image that you'd like to base it around? How do you isolate that image and create a logo from it? What is it you're trying to see and capture?
It's similar, as I said, to the poster in terms of trying to identify what the key elements are. You know, I mean, a logo is essentially visual communication, visual messaging. So you need to identify what the message is. You know, what's most important to the membership. And, you know, that's really the great litmus test for the success or failure of our design and work and branding is, you know, we've designed many, many great logos that are still on the cutting room floor because they didn't fit the membership, you know. Yeah. If it can be as lovely and interesting looking as possible, but if it doesn't move the needle with the members of the club, then, you know, it's not right. It's not the right thing. So trying to identify exactly what the message is, and in terms of, by message, I guess I could reword that and say you're trying to understand the culture of the club as it is today. Yeah. You know, one of our great clients of the last couple of years was a club called Wybranski in Darien, Connecticut. And a great club, Willie Park Golf Course, 125-year-old club in a very posh town in the northeast part of the United States. You know, some great clubs all around it. And they had never had a mark that was up to the level of every other amenity at the club. And they knew it. So in their 125th anniversary, they decided it was time to invest in this and try and rectify this situation. So that's become a very interesting segment of our wheelhouse, is not just branding for golf clubs, but branding for clubs that might be 80 or 100 years old or more. Because you need to create a mark that speaks to the past, but in most cases today, no one wants something that's traditional or vintage looking anymore. I mean, there was a time when vintage was in style.
Do you remember? It was, you know, we would always call them over here, like, you know, Premiership football clubs have huge logos, and you saw that a lot of golf things would be these huge crests with all this detailing.
A lot of like
tennis rackets and rifles
and words, and it's like actually the clean aesthetic. I mean, you know, I always think that the great logos, as I say, the logos that I think are absolutely outstanding are things like Marion with the wicker basket, or Sleepy Hollow, or, you know, Wingfoot. These are just very crisp and clean logos that And each one of those have those kind of unit. I mean, it's easy with Merion. It's like the wicker baskets. It feels like it's a layup. You know, it's all easy for you.
Well, it's funny you say that, because of those three, I think Merion, I mean, not everyone knows this, but that logo, which Merion's at 1896 is the date under their logo. That logo was designed by the golf professional Bill Kittleman on a cocktail napkin in 1979.
Really?
That famous logo, which is
Wow.
the most beloved logo in golf, at least in the States. And everyone assumes, for obvious reasons, that it, is some original mark. I mean, that's one of the selling points that I use for our logo services is Merion had one of those old shields, because Merion Golf Club was originally an offshoot of the Merion Cricket Club, which still exists. And Merion Cricket Club had one of those big shields with the scroll and all the different elements. And that was, the golf club's logo was the same logo for for decades and decades. And then Bill Kittleman, who's still with us and works with Gil Hands as part of his design team, he was the golf professional at Merion for a few decades. And he designed that logo in the late 70s and implemented it in the early 80s, and it's become one of the great ones.
Wow.
And I don't think it really was a layup in terms. I mean, it was very creative. The other two that you mentioned, I feel like are, when a club has a name like Winged Foot,
Yeah.
what are you gonna make the logo? I mean, it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
And when a club is Sleepy Hollow, where the Headless Horseman was written, I mean, that's not too much of a challenge either, so to speak.
They're just the ones that jump out to me off the page. I don't know. I'd be really interested. What are the logos that you kind of see in the game and around where you're like, yeah, do you know what? I just absolutely love that logo. Be a golf club or otherwise. What are some of your favourites?
Wow. Well, my favorites, I mean, it's not that original. My favorites are much like everybody else's. I mean, I'm also from Philadelphia, so
Yeah.
I was born a few miles from Merion, and as a big lover of golf history, I'm a huge fan of great clubs that open themselves up to championship golf, because, right across the river from Philadelphia, you have Pine Valley, which, legendary, mystical place, but very few events in their,
Yeah. Do you ever
century.
go and watch the Crump
But
Cup?
Merion,
Yeah.
on the other hand, has had Bobby Jones,
Yeah.
Ben Hogan,
Yeah.
Jack Nicklaus, and Trevino's famous, So, I think it's a very generous act when a great club that's that private opens its doors. So Merion's logo and Merion as a club is just a near and dear place to me.
There's a big thing in Britain, certainly, and it seems like it's appearing more and more often that you get two logos for a club. You've got the club logo that anyone can buy, and you've got the members logo. Is this a big thing in America? And is it kind of more of a trend that's coming now? And also, how do you go about approaching a separate logo to identify the same place?
It's an interesting trend for sure, and in our experience, we've worked with secondary logos quite a bit over the last few years. I feel like it's really come up in the last few years. The member logo is something that has existed. I kind of feel in my, someone can correct me out there if I'm wrong, but I feel like Pine Valley was the originator of that in the States.
Really?
Their logo was a shield alone for the members, and if it had the name underneath of it, that was the guest logo. So
Yeah.
the logo was
Yeah.
the same. It just
Same
either
with
had
your
type or it
field.
didn't.
Yeah.
And that's how people
Yeah.
could tell whether you were in or out. I am not a huge proponent in general of the member logo versus the guest logo, but the way that we've experienced and encountered and created secondary logos over the last 5 years or so is another great recent client is Wilmington Country Club in Delaware. I believe 1909, right? 36-hole facility, biggest club, best club in the state. Many people feel, of course, always subjective. But so this club had, what we used to call the Lifesaver logo. It's, the ring.
Yeah.
It's my, having looked into this and seen it so many places, I think a lot of that stuff comes straight from over here, and I think it's a championship belt. It's a circular belt with a buckle, and they have some cross clubs and some, the name of the club encircled around it or within it. Again, a great club that, the logo, because these logos they weren't intended to do what they're used for now. A club crest or a club seal from 1919 or 1925 was never intended to to perform the functions that a golf logo does in today's day and age. So consequently, most of them fall short. They either need to be 4 inches tall to be cleanly embroidered, or even if you can see what you're looking at, they're just not that interesting because they were intended to be sort of more of a seal on the stationery than anything else. So anyways, in the case of Wilmington, they had this mark, and it's written into the bylaws of the club that this is the club's mark. So there, it would have been a lot of political arrows to try and, create a new official logo for the club. But everyone recognized that the logo didn't really represent the club the way that the members wanted it to in terms of on their apparel, on their golf bags, on their scorecard and such. So we've ended up creating a lot of secondary logos which exist as what we call merchandise marks. So it's a more pictographic logo that then gets used for, you might say, unofficial applications, which is generally speaking soft goods, and then on golf operations, on the flags, on the scorecards, etc. So in the case of Wilmington Country Club, I'm trying to figure out how to make this a short story, but it's a very old piece of property. The very first merino sheep in the New World were brought over by the DuPont family. It was a gift from the King of France to the DuPont family.
This is getting deeply.
This
I like
is
this.
good.
This is the
This
stuff we
is it.
like.
This
This
is-
is the
this
stuff
is
we
great.
like.
I mean, this is like, I
This is
love
rabbit
this
hole.
too.
It's in the
I'm glad you
weeds.
do.
This is what we love.
I'm glad you do. So, I mean, when you find a story like this, you got to dig and dig and dig. And when you find a story like this, you're like, it's pay dirt, it's eureka moments. And the eureka moments don't always happen. I mean, they don't. But in this case, thanks largely to the director of golf there who unearthed a lot of this. So the very first merino sheep in the New World was a gift from the King of France to the DuPont family. The DuPont family were munitions manufacturers during the Revolutionary War in America. They became, and they still are, the DuPont Corporation is one of the largest multinational chemical companies in the
huge.
world. And they achieved their initial significant wealth by selling munitions to both sides of the war. And they were French originally by descent, had many relations with the old country. Anyway, Irene Dupont, anyway, I don't want to get the names wrong, but this original merino sheep was gifted from the King of France. It came over on the USS Benjamin Franklin to the New World, to the home of the DuPonts. The DuPont family, they own thousands and thousands of acres near
Incredibly
Wilmington.
wealthy, weren't they? Incredibly.
And the Wilmington Country Club now resides on some of the property from the original DuPont estate, right? So there's one structure on the golf course that you can see from everywhere, and it's a sheep barn, and that's what it's known as, the sheep barn. And we were looking at this logo, or we were looking at this building as the logo for a while, because you could see it from the veranda when you were eating, you could see it from the tennis courts when you were playing, you could see it from the fitness facility when you were on the treadmill, and obviously you could see it from the golf course. So it had this ubiquitous quality to it, which is one of the things that we look for when, because especially for a big club, you can't make something that's too golf-centric often, because there's other constituencies at the club that need to be in support of and to wear this mark. So you try and find something that's going to have broad appeal. And the barn had the broad appeal, but then again, it was a barn, and it really, it wasn't sort of elegant. Lots of times when you're doing logos based on literal scenes or literal structures, you get married to a colorway. You have to do the barn in the actual color, and that doesn't look good on half the things that you want to wear. So you run into all these sort of technical user challenges. So we were working with the barn quite extensively, and then we started digging deeper and deeper and finding out about this merino sheep. So it was called the sheep barn because that's where they originally bred merino sheep in the New World. And this very first sheep was a stud ram named Don Pedro.
Okay.
So, I mean, that was a layup. Once we found that out. So Don Pedro is their new mark. It's a stud ram with just 1909. Boy, I hope I'm getting the date right. But underneath of it, and it's been absolutely crushing it. We rolled it out last spring of 21. And it's just been flying off the shelves. We make a little hang tag for a lot of our new club or our new logo clients. When they're putting the logo on new garments for the shop in the shop for the first time, we'll make a little hang tag with the logo on one side and the story of the logo on the other side, So this was a wonderful thing because, again, as a lot of great clubs, you need to re-educate the members to, the members don't, they just, they take so much for granted. They come in and out every day. They don't pay attention to what's around them or the history or any, many of the members, they might be new. I mean, a lot of those types of clubs have multi-generational members, but a lot of golf is booming there like here, and half the members might just be the last 5 or 10 years and they don't know anything. And so you get to really re-educate the membership about some unique and fascinating part of their history, and that was a great story.
It's a brilliant story. It's fascinating. I've just been trying to look for the logo there.
I
can't find it, but I can see what you mean. That the initial ones, it's not the best with the hoop and the clubs that cross over and
it's
stuff.
Just one of those things that, I mean, I would have had no idea there was that amount of research that goes into a logo that's being created. You just think, I need to make something cool, or there's whatever it is. And what's nice is that they have this logo, and hopefully the membership gets educated enough that someone says, why have you got a ram on your shirt? And bang, there's the story. And there's a huge amount of detail and knowledge that you can go down with to try and educate visitors and people that want to come about the club's history.
But exactly that stuff is what makes this game brilliant. Like you saying, the superlatives you're linking it to, talking about, and the purity of it all. It's just brilliant, isn't it? That sense that you could have that whole little story encapsulated in one tiny 40mm logo on your left breast. It's like, sold. I'm curious. Logos obviously have been through different purposes. I mean, when they were used 130 years ago, they were used for completely different purposes anyway. And colours and merchandise, and we've had the big rosettes with scrolls and everything, and now we've got clean little sort of artwork that's going on there. Is it naive to think that maybe what's cool today is probably not going to be cool in 50 years' time? Where does that go? I don't know.
I don't think it's, I think it's inevitable. Tastes change, of course, but I think one of the things that's more interesting perhaps to me than that aspect of it is how some of the rules are changing a little bit. Like, one of the cornerstones of good branding historically always was consistency. I mean, you always see Coca-Cola in the same script and in the same color red, every time. And that's kind of that's a foundational element to to branding and logo design.
They made Father Christmas red, didn't they?
What's that?
They made Father Christmas red, didn't they?
I think that's right. That's my understanding.
Like it became red because of Coca-Cola, yeah.
But I think one of the things that's changing now is I don't know how broadly applied this will be within the world of golf, but like Sweeten's Cove, which I'm sure you're familiar with, right? So Sweeten's, I think they've got a family of about 24 or so logos now.
Really?
And they're just breaking the mold, I feel like, which is really, really interesting. I mean, I don't know that would work for, that's a sort of a hipster spot, and people love to follow it. I mean, that's not going to work for a 100-year-old golf club, that approach.
Millfield, is it? Yeah, but it's like it's experimentation. It's really interesting hearing about things at the tree farm that Zach's working on, and that whole concept that when you're a founding member, there's like almost a sorting hat, and you pick out a logo, and that's your logo for a subset of the membership, and then you've got some internal tribes, and the fact you can have these different logos because they do look good on different pieces of merch. I mean, if we were doing more in the merchandise, we'd probably have another couple of logos that we might use, or do event-specific logos.
Let us know if you ever want some help with that.
As long as you don't go for a monogram.
Do you know what? We wouldn't corny on the pod, but doing something with a little logo that might be cool, that would be amazing to see how you'd approach the cookie jar, because creatively there's some stuff there for sure. I mean, we could, it's mad.
Anytime you have a descriptive name like that, it's so much.
Well, people always ask, why is it called cookie jar, don't they? And like this week, obviously, loads of people go, "What the hell is cookie jar? And why on earth have you called it that?" But you remember the President's Cup? I think it was 2009. Tiger Woods was wearing that big kind of purple crosshatch jumper, and he hit a 4-iron, and his arms kind of go outstretched. And after he marches after it with his arms forward, and he just dips his left arm down a bit when he drops the club, and it looks like his hand's going in a cookie jar. So it's a bit of a Tiger reference there.
Oh, that's interesting. I always assumed it was just sort of like cookies. Like the great golf experiences are treats.
Yeah.
They're like these treats that you aspire to, and you
That's
generally if you're a golfaholic, you want to you're always sneaking off to try and like get a little bit, like a little kid who's trying to get his hands into the jar. So, you tell your boss that your wife's sick, so you can run off and play some.
Exactly. That's the whole thing. It's the whole thing. But it's a fascinating discussion, and we could go for hours, but I'm mindful of your time.
But just before we go, Lee, I know you've said that we all want Rory to win. I think it's fairly common. We all want Rory to win. He's going to be teeing off in 5 hours. What have you got planned? Are you going to get on, do some painting today, or are you just going to go out and enjoy it?
I think today is going to be an enjoyment day. It's been a long week, and I'm not certain. I mean, I've freewheeled a little bit today. The posters are sold out as of yesterday, so I'm footloose and fancy free today, and I might just revert into being a fanboy like the rest of us over here.
Are they all sold out online? If people want to get stuff online,
no, they're available at least on our site, leewybranski.com, and they may still have some at the open site as well. I'm not certain of that, but
you're able to
here
sell
on the ground,
prints for all the major commissions through your website, right?
That's right.
So any of those people can go on and get them. And
I had this one too, which I brought for you guys just to show you.
Oh, beautiful.
The U.S. Open at Brookline. This is a small version.
Do you know, wasn't that a brilliant major though? The whole story. I know, the Francis Ouimet stuff starts to get quite a bit after a week of it straight, but the yellow clubhouse and the colouring then within is the first thing that I guess stands out on this one.
Yeah, well, that was very much deliberate, and you can see comparatively, very different looks. This is sort of a style that I've been working in over the last 5 years or so. Just a little bit punchier. The watercolor work, has this sort of ephemeral, timeless quality to it, and I really wanted to. Yeah, that's Clyde the squirrel.
Yeah.
Everyone knows the squirrel at Brookline, but they're on Clyde Street, so we decided we'd name the squirrel Clyde.
Because the course is the Loops of 9 or whatever that they create the championship course out of is called Clyde and Squirrel, isn't it? Which I think is that 1 9 and the other.
Clyde, Squirrel, and Primrose are the three nines there.
So what's the significance of the squirrel with Brooklyn? I'm
not certain of that, which is odd. You'd think I would know, but one of the other things that's so peculiar, I feel like, is the two of the oldest clubs in America, the Country Club at Brookline and Oakmont, have squirrels. I mean, obviously the Country Club is a yellow squirrel, with green rendering, and not so with Oakmont, but they're very, very similar in terms of their positions, and I'm not really sure how it came to be the squirrel there.
Well, I think you did fantastically to avoid Francis Ouimet's house, because when the coverage was on, you just could not get away from it.
Do you know the membership? And apparently buying that house, and they're going to move it closer and bring it right into... So, I mean, it's already close proximity, but
it's right across the road.
And move it so it becomes...
I didn't know that.
And I think something to do with using it for caddies to play, or like members.
They're going to move it onto the course.
I mean, that's the thing. You guys in America have budgets that are just totally different to the way we operate. Like, you stick 2 zeros on it. But look, we digress. Lee, you've been a superb podcast guest.
Thank you.
Brilliant to hear you kind of narrating through about how you approach this stuff and talking so eloquently about the game. So a big thank you for finding time.
Oh, it's great to be with you, gentlemen. Thanks for the invitation, and have a wonderful open Sunday.
And we will be taking you up on that offer of some logo consultancy as well.
I look forward to it.
Watch this.